Professor Richard Roche, who I'm really excited to welcome. So Professor Roche is a professor of psychology at Maynooth University. His research focuses on memory, aging, stroke and brain injury, and he's published extensively in cognitive neuroscience and neuropsychology. Today, Professor Roche will explore reminiscence as something meaningful and powerful in supporting well-being. So welcome, Professor Roche.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks everybody. It's lovely to be in the room with so many experts. We have classes down in the week of about 600 in the first year, but it's nowhere near as intimidating as of experts like yourselves. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today about some of the research that we've been doing down in Maynooth over the last few years. And it's going to touch on some of the things we've heard about already from Sean and from the panel. We'll talk a little bit about brain areas, not too much detail. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of activity, physical activity and cognitive stimulation. We'll touch on the importance of community and building groups and staying in contact socially. And we'll look at the benefits of doing all these things together. So I'm going to talk mainly about an activity called reminiscence therapy, which some of you might be familiar with. I'll describe that in a little bit of detail. And I'll describe some research that we did attached to two different projects that are connected to combining reminiscence interventions with physical activity in the form of walking. And we had some combined walking reminiscence groups that we worked with down in the town. So at the end, we'll talk about how this has implications for brain health, because as we'll hopefully see, this is a really positive thing to do. It's good for your brain, it's good for your cognitive function, and there's really no downside to doing a lot of these things. So I'm not going to dwell too long on brain systems involved in memory, because Sean gave a lovely outline of that this morning. At this point, we do know a fair bit about how memory is represented in the brain and different areas that are important for memory. And obviously, these are the areas that start to become attacked in conditions like dementia, where these plaques develop and we see damage or erosion of these structures that lead to memory problems that we can have, memory impairments. Now, I'll talk a little bit about types of memory. And if we think about the memories that make us who we are and form the basis of our identity and our past and our sense of ourselves, we're talking about what we call autobiographical memories. But within that category of memories, there's two subtypes. There's what they call semantic and episodic autobiographical memories. And they're subtly different. So the semantic ones, these are your memories for things from your own life, things that you personally experienced, but not individual events. They're more like extended periods of time. So think about your primary school, where you went to school when you were younger. That's not a single event. That's an extended period of years where you went to the same place and you were in the same room, the same building during that time. That would be a semantic episodic memory. Whereas a semantic autobiographical memory. Whereas an episodic one, this is sometimes called event memory. This is for an occasion, a one-off event, like your wedding day or a birthday or a particular Christmas. So that's a kind of distinction within these types of memory. And they're dealt with by different parts of the brain. So the purple areas towards the front of the brain seem to be more connected to these semantic types of memories. For the event, episodic types of memories, that's more towards the back of the brain. And that's partially because when we revisit an event, a particular occasion, we engage in this, it's almost like a mental time travel, where we're transported back into that place and that time. We relive and re-experience the sights and the sounds. And that activates visual areas of the brain, so we can almost picture all the events in our mind's eye. Whereas with the semantic type, they're more distributed over a long period of time, so there's no one moment that we're reliving. We'll come back to these in a little while. Now, some of you will recognise this gentleman. He was on the telly all the time when I was younger. This is Eddie Lennon, and Eddie was a famous shanachie, famous storyteller in the old traditional style of telling stories. And his ability to recall these long, convoluted, complicated plot lines was really impressive. He had a tremendous memory for that. And the idea of storytelling and sharing our own experiences and our own stories and our own past touches on this idea of reminiscence. And I think particularly with Irish people it resonates because we do love to tell a story, spin a yarn, or recall things from our past. So this kind of was of interest to me in the context of what we might do in later life to keep our memories in good shape, to keep them healthy and active. And reminiscence appears to be a way to do this. Now, up until about the 1960s, if an older person started to reminisce about childhood, it was actually considered a bad sign. People thought it was a sign of like regressing to an earlier sort of childhood stage or something. But it was only from the 60s onwards with the work of a man called Butler, who actually identified, actually this is a very useful thing to do and a very positive thing to do. Because thinking back on your childhood, your adolescence, your early life, recalling those memories and pondering them and giving them consideration, that can be very useful in terms of giving your life meaning, thinking back on your achievements, on your sense of purpose, on your identity, on all the things that you've done, on your satisfaction in your life. And it can be very positive for our brains as well, and for our cognitive functions especially. So since then, this emphasis on reminiscence has been really supported by a lot of research. There's been a lot of work done over the decades that suggests that actively remembering from our past, from our earlier lives, can be very, very good for our cognitive function in terms of memory and attention and functions like that, or for our mood, reduces depression, reduces anxiety, or both. It doesn't seem to have any negatives associated with it, provided you keep the memories quite positive and quite upbeat. And we've been working in this area for a few years ourselves. We've been doing research on reminiscence and finding it very effective, and some of you in the room might have been involved in some of that work. So this was the basis of these experiments I'm going to talk about today. We know we have good evidence that reminiscence is positive, it's a good thing to do. And we began to think, can we combine reminiscence with other positive things that we know are also good for the brain? So one idea that I was interested in is the idea of memory and place. Places can be very powerful memory cues. So this is a gun stores on the main street of, does anyone know where that is? Anyone want to guess? It's the main street in Naas. I heard an Uber's there, you're not too far off. That's down the main street in Naas, where I'm from, where I grew up. Does anyone remember what was in that space before it was a Dunn's? Super Quinn, yeah, it was. It was a Super Quinn all through my childhood. And there it was. Now I'm going to test you. Anyone remember what it was before it was Super Quinn? It was, and I couldn't find a picture of it. This is a picture after it closed down as a Super Quinn, but it was a little supermarket called Farrington's. I couldn't get a picture of Farrington's. I got a picture of, that's the corner, so Farrington's would be just in, just in here. This is now a little IKEA shop where they design kitchens. And I found the only other trace of Farrington's I could find. Last summer, we were reading out stuff in the attic, and I found an old copybook with a price tag from Farrington's. And somebody else on the internet also found a very, very old Farrington's sticker. Now, that little act there is a very simple, very quick example of the sort of mental time travel you can get into when you visit a place. When a place has memories attached to it, connected to it. And this is something that I find myself doing all the time. My man does it a lot, where you walk along the main street or a certain place and say, what was that shop before it was a mobile phone shop? Or before it was a vape shop? What was in there before it was a housing estate? Whose field was that? And again, it feels like a very Irish thing to do, but it's a very easy and very powerful mechanism to activate memories and to transport ourselves back to an earlier time. So we wanted to try and harness that idea of memory and place being very powerful, combine it with reminiscence, and also combine it with something else that we know is good for the brain, which is exercise. So we decided to try and combine reminiscence with places and a walking group, a physical exercise group. This was work we did in collaboration with the Alzheimer Society, and it was also working with, there's an arthritis walking group based in Maynooth. They meet down in the canal every week. And this is funded by the IRC. They gave us some funding for these different projects. So the idea is we're trying to multiply the benefits of reminiscence, of exercise, and of place and space, to try and see if we can see benefits from doing this. Again, some of you here will be familiar with this work. We called it AIM-WARM. AIM stands for Age Inclusive Maynooth, and it was Walk and Recall Memories was the acronym we had for this project. And what we did was we designed routes through the town of Maynooth so that we would walk with people, bring them to certain locations in the hope that visiting those places would activate these memories and bring them back into consciousness, back into awareness. So we couldn't have done this work without amazing help from the Alzheimer Society in terms of the Dementia Research Advisory Group, which I know some of you are on, and also Team Up for Dementia Research, which was absolutely crucial in allowing this work to be done. And PPI is becoming increasingly important in research, the involvement of experts like yourselves in designing the research, in shaping it, in figuring out how we're going to do it, in figuring out if it's actually worth doing or not. And the engagement in PPI for all the projects is going to talk about today. We're going to talk about 2 experiments in particular. And again, this was essential because before we started anything, we consulted the experts to try and find out, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're thinking about doing. Is that going to work? What won't work? What are the obstacles that we're not thinking of? Things like what time of day would be best to do this? What duration of walking routes would be most appropriate? What are we not planning for or predicting? That input was fantastic. And again, this was done with the help of the Alzheimer Society. We had to do our initial PPI via Zoom because our teams, because this was during the pandemic. So that was Carmen, my postgrad there, and Cassie, my postdoc, who carried out a lot of these PPI online sessions. I've analysed people as best I can, although the dog is a giveaway for one person particularly. Later on, for the next project, we got to do this in person, and it was much better again, so I remember that afternoon. And with the input of our PPI experts, we designed these 4 routes through Maynooth. So again, some of you will recognise Maynooth town here. So we had 5 routes initially, and then we consulted with yourselves and also with our colleague Ronan Foley. So Ronan is a colleague in Maynooth who's a health geographer, and is particularly interested in the idea of place and health, and how places can enhance or improve health. And based on that, we selected these routes to try and maximise the sort of memory triggers that people would encounter as we walked with them through the town. And we also did a walkability survey to make sure it's going to be safe and navigable and not bothered by too much traffic and things like that. So we selected 4 of the 5, which were high on walkability. And we did this initial study, which was done in the summer of 2022, where we had our 4 routes. We had a group. We initially had 2 people living with dementia who were our pilot participants to see if the whole thing would work, or if we were mad to try and do it. And we gave them some tests of memory and mood and some other measures. We did 2 routes per week for 2 weeks. And then we did the same tests again to see if we could see any changes in particular aspects of cognitive function or mood, psychological variables. And we recognized some of the team there in their high vis. We also had this bag here on wheels, which contained portable stools or seats, umbrellas, snacks, water, various supplies, which again emerged from those PPI sessions as being very crucial. The umbrellas were the most important, even though it was May, June of that year. So I'm not going to get into the technical stuff too much, but based on this initial pilot with just 2 people, we saw some small improvements on things like the MoCA, which is a general cognitive test. This is the one Donald Trump keeps saying that he's a genius based on. So our participants are just as good. We saw some improvements on measures of quality of life. Again, these are very small because it's only 2 people. A little increase, not massively, on satisfaction with life. And this is a big dip on a communications questionnaire, which a lower score is better. So we found serious improvements on communication with others and with family members. Now, that study really was to see if we could tap into memories. So the main thing we were interested in was memories. And going back to those two types of memory we talked about before, these are the results of this is a questionnaire called the EMI, which is the Episodic Autobiographical Memory Interview. And this questionnaire looks at memories from different epochs of life, different life stages, from childhood to early adulthood, middle, late, and recent. And for several of them, we saw increases in the number of memories people could recall during early and middle adulthood. Now, these are for the semantic memories, the extended periods of time. And again, it's only 2 people, but still it's encouraging because we also saw increases in recent memories as well. And when it comes to the event memories, the one-off events, like weddings, again, we saw increases for childhood and early adulthood memories, and also for late adulthood and recent memories as well. So very small numbers, they won't stand up to statistical analysis, but as a pilot, it was very encouraging, and we wanted to continue with this idea, this research prospect and our proposal. So, to summarize there, my arrows have moved around a little bit, but we saw some increases or steady scores on satisfaction level. So we decided to try and increase the number of people as part of a bigger project. So we had also got funding for a larger project called Triadics, which is to do with tailored reminiscence interventions for aging and dementia in community settings. These grant funders love acronyms, so we always have to keep making up these acronyms. And this is part of a broader project where we try to combine reminiscence with other things, walking again, but also music or breath work or Tai Chi, other positive things, beneficial things. And again, we did PPI with this, and you can see here, we'll remember that afternoon in the Glen Royal in Maynooth where we did that PPI session. And the idea here is we would do this with 4 different groups of people. Older people in the community, not living with dementia, because again, reminiscence is beneficial for everyone, and we've seen good evidence that it's just a good thing to do for brain health. A group of people living with Alzheimer type dementia, a group of people living with progressive aphasia, PPA, and also older prisoners in the prison system. I'm not going to talk about the other stuff today. We also had a scanning study where we did some MRI scanning before and after, which I might talk about another time. So this is the overview of this bigger project, but we're just going to focus on the walking group again. Now we also did a thing with music. I won't get into that today. So we had our walking groups. We had more people this time. So we had 5 people living with dementia, 5 people without, around the same age from the community. These are photographs from the route going through the campus, the old campus of Maynooth. It's been old handball alley, so there's some handball going on. That's rolling there, rolling Foley again. And this all took place over the summer of 2023. But it was a very similar design, same idea. I'm just going to focus on the memory measures here. So again, this is the semantic memories going back to childhood, early adulthood, and these are the time periods where we saw benefits or increases. Now again, it's only 5 people, it's not hundreds and hundreds of people, but it's still consistent, and it's encouraging for that middle period of life. People are remembering more memories after doing this. And then for the event memories, some increases for early adulthood, and then late adulthood and recent memories as well. So we've got some good trends towards doing this. Does seem to increase your recall for particular memories. We also saw a reduction in depression as well. I haven't put the graph up there, but there was a reduction in depression after doing this. In this case, it was 4 weeks. The previous one was just 2 weeks. And we also got a lot of very positive qualitative feedback as well. So the feedback we got at the end from taking part in this was resoundingly positive. People enjoyed the experience, they enjoyed the social aspect of it, because we were going around in small groups. The interactions between the participants was really positive and appears to have provided lots of important benefits. Sorry. So based on what we're seeing here, it seems like you can enhance or increase the benefits of something like reminiscence by combining it with something else that's also positive, like physical activity or social interaction, group settings. And it does seem to be the case that group-based reminiscence is more powerful than individual reminiscence. Either are positive, but group-based seems to bring the benefits of social contact and social connection. We see improvements, like I said, either in aspects of cognition, or in mood, or both. So that's very positive. Like I said, there's really no downside to doing this. And this is something that everyone can do and should try doing. It's a very interesting, rewarding activity to go down the main street of where you grew up and try to remember what used to be there when you were a child, or what was there before it became a vape shop, or whatever it is now. And it's something you can do even if you're not physically in the same place as the other person. You may have people with reduced mobility who can't walk very well. You may have people who live in the other side of the country. You can still do this. You can do it thanks to technology. You can go on Zoom, and you can share the screen on Zoom with Google Street View, and you can go to places now, like the Common Bridge, and in Street View there's an option to go back in time to previous years to what it would have looked like years ago. And everyone that remembers that baby sign from the corner of Elm Street when you get the bus home along the quays after coming up to Dublin for a day of shopping. I'll give you a lovely example of this. If you go to somewhere like the Roost in Maynooth, and again this is in the main street of Maynooth, this is the pub where most of the students go. If you go to it on Google Street View, there's a little option called, that's gone very pixely there, but there's an option there for other dates. And when you click that, it brings up a little timeline down the bottom where you can go back to 2021, 2019, 2016, 2009. So you can go back to 2009 and see what the pub looked like back then. Some places it goes back to 2006. I think that's the earliest these go back to. But even that small activity, doing this with someone over Zoom or over Teams, or even better in person, can really help to transport people back, reactivate those memories, and bring people back to that time and that place. There it is, I think that's 2009, that's as early as it goes. So, to wrap up, reminiscence is good for the brain. Walking is also good for the brain. Combining the two seems to be a bit better for the brain. But you can also combine reminiscence with other positive things. And Sean mentioned before the lifestyle factors that are important. Diet, sleep, not too much alcohol, smoking, all those things. These are all, there's plenty to do with dementia and brain health that are outside of our control. There's genetic factors, there's other factors. But there's quite a lot that's within our control that we can change, that we can do. So the brain isn't a muscle, but it's helpful sometimes to think of it as if it's one. Because if you exercise it and keep it active and keep it in good shape, especially after retirement, that will lead to benefits. And we'll see those benefits in the years that follow. So I think the message here is there's a lot we can do to shape our environment, to shape our lives in ways that will facilitate and help our brain keep it healthy. And the crucial thing is to make connections. Make connections between yourself and places, between those places and the past, between yourself and other people, and that will facilitate keeping your memory in better shape later in life and for long. Very finally, I'll finish up with, there's a really lovely film that's currently on the Disney Channel with the actor Chris Hemsworth, who brings his dad on a road trip. His dad has early stage dementia. They go on a road trip back to the childhood house where they grew up, and it gets into reminiscence therapy in a bit of detail. I'll just leave you with the trailer for that.
You ready to go back in time?
Back in time. Here we go.
My dad and I are going on a road trip back into our past. He has early stage Alzheimer's, and it turns out this experience could help fight the disease. How's it feel?
I can't.
Different places instantly bring those memories to life. It's about connection.
So it's a lovely documentary. It's less than an hour long. It's on the Disney Channel at the moment, and it touches on a lot of the ideas that we just mentioned today. So to finish up, there's a lot of people. These are the people who worked on these projects. Andrew Keelan particularly Mel, the funders, our brilliant colleagues at the Alzheimer Society. The main people on these projects were Cassie, Michelle and Carmen. And I'm happy to report that about 3 weeks ago, Carmen passed her by, so it's now Dr. So, you might get to see a recording of this at some point. So congratulations, Carmen. Thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to take a few questions.
Mr. Roche, so we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Would you like to go ahead? And also, just when the question is asked, I'll just repeat it through the microphone to make sure we all know what it was.
Congratulations on a very interesting topic. I'm just wondering, do you see it being scaled up, or could it be used in a care setting? And the second part of the question, when you were working with people, did you bring any carers along who may have been involved?
Brilliant. So Tanya asked if this could be scaled up and used in a care setting. And the second part of this question was, did you bring any carers along when you were doing the preparation of the study?
Yeah, so thanks so much. Great questions. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that can be scaled up very easily. The great thing about Reminiscence, it's basically free. It doesn't really cost anything. You don't need equipment. You just need a room and some refreshments. Often it works very well if there are props or triggers or items, but that's typically stuff that people own and bring along. So it's a very financially cost-effective thing to do, and it is often used in care settings, particularly in Japan and in China, and increasingly here, and I hope it continues here. And to the second question, yeah, we did. Yeah, so particularly for the second experiment, we had a control group, and a lot of the control group were spouses or people who live with our participants. I didn't show their results, but they also showed benefits in some of these features as well. So it seems to be beneficial for everyone involved.